I'd like to call to order the December 8th meeting of the Clive City Council. Will the clerk please call roll?
Mayor Edwards,
Here.
council members Klein,
Here.
McCoy,
Here.
Judkins,
Here.
Weaver, Michaelanani.
Here.
Thank you.
If you'd all rise and join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I know of no additions to the agenda.
Approval.
Second. A motion second to approve the agenda. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
nay. The agenda is approved. Next, we have citizen presentation. This is the opportunity for anyone to approach the council on an item that is not on the agenda. Pete, I'll let you check and see if we have anyone online. And while we do that, let me just reiterate principles here we have for participation. Clive supports the pillars of character counts, endeavoring at all times to promote and model the principles of trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. In conducting our work, we expect that all participants will act in a respectful manner consistent with these principles. Anyone online, Pete?
For anybody online who'd like to raise your hand, you can use the raise hand function on your Zoom screen. If you look down at the bottom at the icon row and click on reactions, you can choose raise hand. Mayor, I don't see any hands going up.
Do we have anyone in the chamber who would like to address the council? If so, please come forward. Seeing no one coming forward, we will move on to consent items.
Approval.
Yeah, I was just looking at P, but I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? Consent items are approved by a vote of 4. All right, the next item we have is our continuous process improvement. Dennis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're leaving the best for last. Thank you for letting me present the 2022 process improvement for the Tech Services Department. A number of months back, we started implementing a 2-factor authentication project. Our cyber insurance carrier requires us now for our insurance coverage. So I'm just going to kind of show you what this experience looks like for the staff users every day when they log in. So we're going to use the overhead document cam, and I'll show you how this is going to work. So typically the user would just log into their computer. They're presented with this screen. Most of the time we have this set up with the users to just auto push to their phone. And I've got the app open right there. And before it times out, I'm going to click send push. And again, this is automatic for most users. It sends the notification to their phone. They just hit approve. And then the login process continues. And then they can still get access to all their regular network resources. As you saw there in the login screen, there's 3 options to authenticate. There's the push to the phone. The second one is to actually call the cell phone, and then you get a recording, you identify yourself, hit a key, and it logs you in. The third is doing a passcode, and what that does is allows you to put in the code that presents on your phone. The other way that we can do the passcode is through a fob device, which you'll see here. This particular fob is not configured with this, my account, but we do use the fobs on some of these accounts that are not assigned to a particular user. So like over in Public Works, we got a number of different general accounts that we use for water maintenance, sewer maintenance, those types of things. So those accounts are set up with a fob, and they have a unique ID number that we then that we assign to the account. And that fob then is connected to that account. So they would just simply push the button. Probably a little hard to see on the screen, but it just gives them the passcode right there, and they would enter that in. Also, for our remote connections, so people are working from home and they log into the VPN appliance. The VPN appliance is configured to work directly with Duo. So they would similarly be prompted on their Duo app on their phone to accept their authentication.
Dennis, what happens if their phone, they damage it or they forget it, or what's the backup?
Good question. The first week we implemented the first department, we had somebody forget their phone. We do have workarounds from the management console that we can go in and do a bypass for them so they can go ahead and get logged in. But we also make sure we correctly identify the person before we would go in and let them bypass. So, but the first week we didn't know that. So they grabbed one of their kids to hit the approve button on their phone sitting in their house. Not the best way to accomplish that, but we have figured out the bypass stuff because we've had a couple of users forgot their phones at home and need to get connected. So, sure.
Dennis,
ahead.
what's the criteria that triggers a security measure? Is it an everyday thing or is it an every login type of action?
We adjusted the settings while we were doing the initial rollout. We currently have everybody set up for 12 hours, so they can pretty much get through the day. The screens will lock and go into screensaver mode after about 20 minutes. So when they go back in just to log in, you'll see that pop up, but it'll just automatically log them in. And we thought 12 hours was a good number.
Has it been seamless with their phones, other apps, things like that, their personal apps? We've had some terrible trouble with Adobe on their phones. So if you want your emails, are you doing two-factor identification on your phones as well? If you get your emails to your phones?
We are setting up Duo for the email accounts as well. We've got about 10 left to do on that.
No troubles with that.
We've had some kind of tricky phone issues, mostly with iPhones, but
Yeah.
we've been able to resolve those.
Huh. Okay.
Don't seem to have any conflicts with other apps running on the phones.
Dennis, you may have mentioned this at the beginning, but this is enabled for everybody, right?
Correct.
Okay, great.
And one thing I wanted to mention, Your Honor, too, with this is Dennis and James, this was a heavy lift. This was a big undertaking, one that we had to undertake. It's our cybersecurity insurance is predicated on this. But I can tell you just from the seat that I sit, I feel much better about our network security and the fact that it relatively our staff embraced it. A lot of us are doing these kinds of things anyway, whether it's your financial, your bank, online banking, things like that. It's kind of become a norm, which I think was easier for us to implement it now. Now you're always, have some conversations of, well, it's on my phone. That's the fob. We have alternatives. If they don't want to use their own personal phone, it can call a number that they have to get a code and verify on their city phone. So there was ways, but I would say 95%.
We had very good adoption.
Very good adoption in terms of them just using their own devices, but we had those alternatives in place because we knew we needed those, especially for those shared accounts, but also anybody who had concern with using their personal device. So it was a heavy lift, one that was very important for us to get to, and very successful project for Dennis and James and all of our staff who had to learn something new pretty quickly.
And, you know, despite some of the grumbling with the staff, it was pretty well adopted overall, so. But again, something new and always got to grumble about it, so.
Well, thank you, Dennis.
Sure.
Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, thank you for show and tell. All right, the next we move into action items, and Jill, I think, is up first, but did we publish the appropriate public notice for this hearing?
Yes, Your Honor. The public hearing notice was published in the Des Moines Register on November 21st, 2022 for this item and our next action item.
All right, thank you, Matthew. Jill.
Mayor and council, thank you. Tonight, this is for a stormwater detention vacation and then accepting of a new, pretty much if you remember a couple months ago, there was a new development plan, site plan amendment for Living Faith Lutheran Church. They're looking to add a couple additions to the building. And one of them happens to run through the old stormwater detention easement. So what's in front of you is vacating that old easement, and then a new one has been created around the proposed additions to the building. There's a couple of representatives here tonight if you have any questions, but it's pretty straightforward, just getting rid of the old and implementing the new in accordance with the approved site plan.
Thank you. Any questions for Jill or our representatives? Otherwise,
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
thank you. We have a motion to close the public hearing. Is there anyone here in the chamber to address the council on that matter? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post the vote? By a vote of 4-0, the public hearing is now closed.
Move the resolution vacating stormwater detention easement, Country Club West, Plat 1, Lot 2, Country Club West, Plat 3, Lot 7-4.
Could we have a second?
A second. I was just seeing if we could do them both at the same time. Second.
We have a motion and a second on the resolution vacating the stormwater detention easement. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote? That passes by a vote of 4-0.
Move the resolution accepting stormwater detention easement, Country Club West, Plat 1, Lot 2, and Country Club West, Plat 3, Lot 7-4.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the resolution accepting the easement. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? That passes by a vote of 4-0. Next up,
Thank you, council.
thank you. Doug?
Good evening. What's before you tonight is the proposed 2023 to 2027 capital improvement plan. It's representing a little over $107 million worth of improvements over that 5-year period. The projects range from maintenance-related improvements to new capacity and roadways to new parks and other facilities across the entirety of the city. The only change that has been made in the proposed plan since we discussed this at your workshop last month is an adjustment to the timing associated with the Northwest 99th Court reconstruction project. That project has been moved up 1 year. And as at your request, the implications of moving that one project forward, we did have to move one project back. So Harbach Phase 2 has been moved back into the place where Northwest 99th Court was. Practically speaking, that probably works out the best based on the work, the pre-planning and so forth that we'll be doing around Harbach, Lenan, and so forth. So overall, the financials and the way the plan lays out really doesn't change, just simply moving that project forward 1 year and Harbach back. Otherwise, the projects are constrained within the available financial capacity of the city. We still have ample capacity to address unforeseen needs or new issues that might arise over the next few years. We were able to provide you a little additional information as requested to kind of give you a sense of what that capacity is. So when that need arises, and it will arise at some point in the not too distant future, you will have to look at finding some additional financial capacities to move some of these projects forward. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have on the proposed plan. We've not received any comments for or against at this point.
Any questions for Doug? Otherwise, we'll need to close the public
Move.
hearing.
Close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion to close the public hearing. Before we do so, is there anyone in the chamber who wishes to address the council on this issue? As Matthew indicated, we did publish the appropriate public notice. Seeing no further discussion, would the council please vote on closing the public hearing? And then would the clerk please post that vote? And the public hearing is closed by a vote of 4-0. Next item would be the resolution approving the CIP.
Move the resolution approving 2023 to 2027 capital improvement plan.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the CIP. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? That resolution passes by a vote of 4-0. Next item, we have the proposed ordinance to combine the Parks and Rec and Public Arts Board. Richard.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tonight is the second consideration of the combination of the Public Arts and Recreation Board and the Public Art Commission into one joint Parks, Recreation, and Library Board. I'm sorry, Parks, Recreation, and Public Art Board. We would ask that you consider waive the third consideration so that we can get started and meet in January. Take any questions you have.
Questions for Richard? Otherwise, we need a motion to suspend the rules and it will require 4 votes.
Richard, any feedback from members of Public Art or Parks and Rec Board on this? What's the overall consensus from those 2 different boards?
So everyone was in favor of it. Just seeing how we're trying to integrate art more into all the projects that we're doing. I think both the Public Art members as well as the Parks and Recreation Board members saw a lot of synergy by combining them into that one board that can really focus on the both efforts together.
Thank you.
I'll move that the rule requiring that an ordinance be considered and voted on for passage at 2 council meetings prior to this meeting be suspended with respect to ordinance number 1127.
Second.
Motion and second to suspend the rules. Again, 4 votes required. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote? Okay, the rules are suspended by a vote of 4-0.
Move that ordinance number 1127 be considered, placed upon its passage, and adopted.
Second.
We have motion and second to approve the ordinance. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote? That passes by a vote of 4-0. Ordinance number 1127 is declared to be enacted. Next up, we've got discussion of CIT. Chief?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mayor and council, back on October 13th, we did a presentation, Darcy Alt from Heart of Iowa region, and I both presented information on a crisis intervention team. I won't repeat all the same information that we presented last time, but at that time, the general direction we got from the council was that they were supportive of this. There were some questions regarding the stability of the 3-year contract. Our city staff and city attorney have done a lot of work with Dallas County and the Heart of Iowa region, and we bring an updated 28E agreement before you tonight. One of the provisions or one of the things that's happened since October 13th and is in the memo from council that the region secured a vote of funding through its board for the proposed first 3-year term. So we would glad to answer any questions at this point.
Questions for the chief? Eric?
Chief, real quick, obviously we understand the importance of mental health and especially how these importance consistently escalates every year.
Mhm.
How do you choose the right officer for this position? Would it be from existing or we recruit elsewhere? Give us a little color on how that process goes.
Sure. In anticipation of the project getting started, we did select an officer internally. We put out the job description to all of our officers. We did an interview process that involved a couple people from the police department, and then Darcy Alt and Melinda, the two that presented. We wanted to make sure that we were getting the right officer, and we've selected Officer Kelly Recchia to be our CIT officer, as long as this program is approved, and we would like to start right after the 1st of January.
So then we will hire an additional police officer for Officer Recky's position. Then is that how?
That's correct. We do not currently have a list, so we will be putting together a hiring process. So that one position would be unfilled at this point. We'll be receiving funding from Heart of Iowa starting January 1st to pay for our officer, but we'll have one position that would stay unfilled until we get that officer hired. And once that officer is hired, their academy costs at the ILEA will also be covered through this grant.
Other questions?
Just a couple concerns that I know a few of us brought up in the last round is, fully supportive of the program and what it can do, hoping that it, really lowers maybe some patrol, duties and all that. In 3 years, that's my concern, right? I brought up. Before.
Yes.
I think the data will dictate where it goes in 3 years. But I do think we need to be prepared to make those tough decisions in 3 years, because when I remember us discussing the 410s and bringing officers up early, we were at our full build out if we did that, is what was discussed here. And so another officer to me is, in excess of one. So I guess let's let the data dictate in 3 years where we're at, and then look at this again. And we're not obligated, correct, on moving it forward. But I agree with Matt, made some comments. I agree with this is the way policing should be headed, and we should be at the forefront of it in the metro. So.
Okay. And on the staffing, when we did add the 3 officers, I reviewed back through my budget memo in that year. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a promise that we would never need any more officers. And I did confirm today that budget memo did line up with population trends and need, that we had been delayed adding officers, and we were adding 3 for the program, but there was not a promise that we would never need officers in the future.
Well, we'll debate this at another time.
Okay.
We were told on population build out was to that number, and we know what our population more or less will be. But again, that's a 3-year discussion. In 3 years, we can have about, and hopefully we don't even have to have it. This program dictates, the data dictates that we continue it.
Yeah, we're very excited
Yeah.
about the program. I mean, you're absolutely correct when you say that this is the way we need to go. We need to relieve that back pressure from patrol officers from spending all this time. We've seen bad outcomes across the country when officers who aren't trained well enough deal with these difficult situations, and violent outcomes have happened. We're hoping to stay away from those and get, in the end, get the people who need help, the help that they need, which is good for all of us.
Mhm.
I would add, Your Honor, too, if I could, Chief did a nice job in the packet to kind of outlining some of the metrics, some of the data, to Councilmember McCoy's point that we want to be tracking. So when we get towards, we're not right at the end of the 3 years, we'll obviously be having this conversation of what the next steps are, probably that 2.5-year mark. So this actually times out pretty nicely with it starting on January 1. We'll have kind of a budget decision point, but we'll be tracking that information and then reporting that back to the council. We won't wait until 2.5 years. We'll be providing you regular updates on how this is progressing, but then we wanted to set the stage for what's the program expectations, what's the chief expectations that he has for the program, and made sure that we kind of outline that in the council packet. So then again, that's in the record, and then we can refer back to that when a decision point is needed. I feel pretty comfortable that this 3 years will have this funding. Of course, we have some protections in place in the 2080 agreement, and I see fortunately, the state of Iowa in a positive direction in terms of mental health funding going forward. But again, we never know, right? 3 years from now, 2.5 years from now. But I hope that this program is successful and continues for a number of years beyond just even the 3-year pilot. So we'll see. Proof will be in 2.5 years.
Other questions? Otherwise, what we're looking for is a resolution.
Move that ordinance number 1127.
Number 4, resolution approving 2080 agreement.
I'm sorry.
I'll move it.
Go ahead.
Move the resolution approving 2080 agreement with Heart of Iowa Region for
Second.
crisis intervention.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the resolution to approve the CIT program. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? And that passes by a vote of 4-0.
Can I ask a follow-up question? I
Certainly.
apologize, Mayor. I think we're fortunate to be in this position to get this offer. Waukee started it. Who else is getting the offer? Do we know?
Urbandale is
Okay.
running like shoulder to shoulder with us to get started. I believe they've named their officer. West Des Moines is preparing. They're a little behind because of some staffing shortages, but they may have more than one CIT officer just based on the population and the demand. So it would be great if all of our Westcom agencies had the program. I would like to see sometime in the future us being able to share those resources the way we do with other police officers every day.
It'd be nice to stagger it on the shift.
Yes.
Kind of like what we do with K9, where we try to have one agency have a K9 on shift at some point. It'd be nice to always have a CIT that we could share across that's on shift.
I think that would be the importance of all the cities.
Yep.
Being involved. So
Just
that's-
an example of regionalism, how we work together to consolidate resources and use them for the best benefit of our citizens. So agreed 100%.
Yep, we're excited to be a part of it.
All right, well, the next item on the agenda is the flock safety cameras. Now, before we can discuss this, though, really, we need to have a motion to take this off the table. It was tabled at the October 13th meeting, so that would be the first thing I would request.
Move to take motion off table.
Do we have a second? Second. We have a motion second to take this issue off the table. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote? So the motion to take it off the table passes by a vote of 4-0. Take it away. Chief.
As the mayor mentioned, on October 13th, we tabled an agreement that we brought forward that night. We brought a proposed contract with Flock Safety for safety cameras to be placed around Clive in an effort to help us solve property crimes. We identified that during our strategic planning that we weren't meeting the metrics that we wanted to meet. And this was basically a process improvement at its best, a way to use technology, another tool for us to increase that solve rate. When we presented the contract that night, council members had a number of questions and concerns about the technology, questions about the technology, and questions about the terms of the contract. Since that time, Ms. Stanger has worked a lot on the contract with Flock, and we've had great cooperation from Flock getting to a version of the contract that staff is comfortable with. I think we've also answered offline a lot of those technical questions that came up. So tonight we bring before you a new and improved agreement, and staff recommends approval for this 60-day trial.
Your Honor, I just wanted to mention too that we had some final adjustments that we were working on. So we've handed out and distributed to the council a kind of final revised agreement pending some of those final changes. I don't know if attorney, you want to mention anything about that, but I think we feel comfortable with that revised agreement that's in front of you, able to make some last minute changes and get those incorporated. And also, as I've mentioned to council too, this is a pilot period here where we're testing out the cameras. We also have, there will be a decision point of whether we move forward with the cameras. Of course, we'll have a budget discussion about that here in terms of funding for that going forward. So there'll be another opportunity if we need to make further changes, we can do that in the future.
Very good. Questions?
What was it? What was the length of that pilot program, Matt? Was it 30 days?
60 days.
60 days, yes.
60 days.
Okay.
So kind of prior to the end of the 60 days, kind of the chief and I have talked about in that 30 to 60 day window, we'll have a decision point. We'll follow up the council of what we're finding, what we're seeing, recommendation from staff of if we're seeing success, what camera locations would we recommend if, again, if the budget is off, if the funding is authorized to move forward, is about $2,500 per camera location, right?
Right.
So there'll be a couple decision points still to come on this, but we'll want to touch base with you on that before we move forward.
I appreciate Councilmember McCoy's diligence on that and making sure that the parameters of that pilot program were in this contract. And council, I appreciate that as well. I think to have moved forward quickly before we tabled that last time would have not been in the best interest of the city, leaving that, nobody likes gray area, right? Nobody likes things that you consume on that. So appreciate those actions and appreciate firming up the details on that contract with Flock. I think that shows good oversight.
Yeoman's work went to Christina on that.
Further discussion or questions or comments?
Just wanted to make a quick comment. I appreciate, like Chief said, I appreciate Flock's, willingness on this, and then also Christina's work on this, because I know I kind of sprung it on her. So
I think legal counsel is making a final look at a couple of things right now.
Yeah, I'll just, Mr. or Councilmember Michelini's final edits were in 3.2. And quickly Flock addressed and accepted all, for the most part, they were in 3.2, accepted those changes. And we're really grateful that we have such a cyber and risk manager expert on the council to add that expertise. So that's the need for the last minute change. Shores up that issue.
And just an overall good guy.
Well, I didn't say that. That's
Okay.
yet to be determined.
Okay.
I'm just teasing.
Move the resolution, approve the contract for test of Flock safety cameras.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion, Michael?
Yeah, could I just get a clarification on the term and termination, section 6.1, on that first paragraph? I think it's too much legalese for me, but
Sure.
what's this really mean in
You bet.
layman's terms? How long are we signing up? What are the lengths of renewals?
Yep, you bet. So what you have here really are two documents. The first 2 pages of your packet are the order form, and then the governing agency agreement. So you really have two documents, and the purpose of clarifying the incorporation of order form really is to identify that term and that pilot period and the price quote. So what we did in 6.1 is incorporated that order form as really the basic terms of the contract. So this initial term of the agreement is the time period set forth on your form. Well, on your order form, the initial term is 12 months. Of that 12 months, 60 days of that is a pilot program. After that 12 months, you have the option to renew for up to another 24 months if you'd like, and frankly, you can amend however much you'd like to. for your next terms. That's a brief translation of 6.1. However, for the full interpretation of the contract, I refer you to the terms
video?
itself.
Oh, okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, I
Bridge
guess
the
I'm confused and I'm good with this overall. I just like into the weeds a little bit. The 60 days to me should be not part of the 12 months, right? But I guess either way, we're fine, right? We shorten it up, but it seems like we're signing up for a 12 month, even though we have a 60-day, but I guess it's just void if we can get out of it
Yeah,
in 60 days.
60 days.
you get to choose
Lemon law.
Yep, you could choose 0 on 60
Sure.
days and you're done. You could choose 1. And then a year later, you could choose 5 more. You can adjust as you go. There's a lot of flexibility in here.
And as Matt said, I think there's more discussions to be had, right? The parameters of how we use flock within the city and all that to come to be laid out by the council.
It'll be interesting to see data proposed on how flock has solved crimes and assisted. I look forward to seeing some
Yeah,
examples. of success.
early on, we'll be able to bring you examples of successes we've had. If we're looking at reduce or increasing our solve rate, that's going to take a little time for that much data to come in. But I would say, you know, year after year, we're going to look at our property crime solve rate. And I hope that this shows that we're able to increase that number. And the more arrests we make with that, it should drive our crime rate down as well. So we're very excited about the product.
If you want to talk a little bit about just high level of the council, I mean, of course, there's going to be policies that the department's going to be putting in place of how this tool is going to be used. Authorizations, of course, I think you talked about last time in October about what gets, how a license plate gets put on or a vehicle description gets put on the system. Who does
Sure.
that, kind of the checks and balances a little bit. I know you're going to formalize that in policy for the department and something that I'll see at some point. But can you talk just a little bit about kind of how that happens, that process?
Yeah, I believe on the last packet, I had a draft of our internal policy on how this information is used. This is a criminal investigation tool. It's not to be used for personal use. It's not to be used for political use. The agreement that we have with Flock is that we will, for every search that we do, for every in the system, that we have to have a purpose written in there. That would either be a report number or just what the purpose of that is. We have lots of other tools we use the same way every day. NCIC, criminal history checks, credit bureau checks to find people, and those are all strictly for criminal purposes. And our policies will include instructions for our personnel that is what that is for.
Does the person making that search have to identify themselves? We have a paper trail back to see
Yes,
who's requested information, who's accessed it.
every person logging into the system will have a personal login, so we'll know who's accessing that information. And if they put in search criteria, you have to indicate what the reason is. So it lays out an audit trail for us. If we ever have reason to believe that there was misuse of the system, we're going to be able to find it. There are possibilities of misuse of this, but there's possibilities of misuse of a lot of the other tools we use every day, such as NCIC and criminal history checks. But those also have logging trails that will come back to the person misusing that system and help us to correct that and take action.
As long as we have checks and balances and policies in place, we're covering ourselves.
Yeah, we're very aware that this is a powerful tool, and we're going to be very careful on how we use it. We'll roll it out first with our detectives for follow-up investigations, but then we'll also put it out for our officers in the field, that they'll be able to get notifications when a stolen car or a wanted person rolls into Clive before they may come into town and commit another crime. I was reading at the beginning of this meeting a report from Altoona on their system. They've had it in place a little less than a year, and it was pretty amazing the list of serious crimes that they've been able to solve And a lot of them were bad people coming in to Altoona from out of town. They've got a lot of hotels. We do too. You may have noticed that we have some activity around some of our hotels. So it's going to help us police that better, get bad people off the street, and at the same time, law-abiding citizens, it just falls into the background and falls off the system.
I think it's one important thing to point out too, as part of their CALIA process. And council doesn't obviously see this, but there's certain policies or checks that the chief has to do and make me aware of, or I have to sign off on and things like that. And I would say with tools like this, that's something too that I'll get a little bit more involved in, just as a part of a check and balance, as you mentioned, Councilmember Coyne.
And Chief, one more, I think you mentioned this before, but these camera locations, none of them are planned for neighborhood areas, right? They're all just kind of like public thoroughfares.
Yeah, these are mostly high traffic areas. A neighborhood probably wouldn't be the most productive. If we happen to have it in the place where something happened, that would be great. But frankly, it really wouldn't pay off for $2,500 a year. They're going to be places like on Hickman, on 100th Street, 114th Street, 108th, near a series of hotels there. And we've identified some of our higher property crime areas, Menards, Kohl's, places like that, where people flee after committing thefts. So we'll be able to pick up on those vehicles when they leave these areas that have a lot of crimes.
What's your initial deployment? 10 or 20, or how many cameras initially?
Say that again, sir.
What's your initial deployment of cameras on?
We'll have 20 in our initial deployment, and the placeholder I put in our proposed budget for next year was 25,000, which would equate to 10 of those. But we really want this to be data driven. We'll look at all 20 locations and find out which ones are producing results, and we will come back to you if we want to continue with this program after 60 days. And if so, how many of those locations that we're interested in keeping.
I think the data will prove it, right? And I'm a believer in the system, right? It's going to be in the philosophy behind the system of how it works and the parameters we put in and that we allow to be put in are going to be kind of the devil's in the detail. And I'm not after everybody in town to figure out what's going on with them, and what's happened. We're kind of after those big ones. But what I'm understanding is, Altoona is an example. Had a discussion with them as well. They put in, high-level felonies, high-level, car thefts, those type of things.
Yeah, their successes I was reading are anywhere from a theft suspect vehicle leaving their library to a wanted sex offender who they came into town and was hanging around an area where there were children present. So, there's a good possibility it prevented a serious crime. So, but crime is the central point. This is not about anything except criminal activity, getting leads for the detectives on crimes and tagging those people who are in stolen cars or who are wanted on warrants.
Other questions? Again, what we're looking for here is a resolution.
There's one on the table. You want?
Yeah, I interrupted. I seconded.
Oh, yeah, the discussion's through me on.
Yes, sir.
I thought we were done. So in that case,
We are
any
now.
further discussion? Being done with the council, please vote. And the clerk, please post that vote. And that passes by a vote of 4-0. Pete, our legislative priorities.
Thank you, Your Honor. Matthew, could I have the lectern, please? The lectern. Thank you. Mayor and Council, this is the updated version of the state legislative priorities that were initially reviewed at our November meeting. At that time, Councilwoman Judkins had asked that we include the values from the Iowa League of Cities to sort of lead off our priorities, and that's what you see adapted here, points 1 through 5. Following that are our more specific policy proposals and the edits that were recommended, including adjusting our final point, which previously had a bullet specifically about the state adopting a statewide building code. We've now removed that and added it into the general language there under number 5. With that, staff would recommend approval.
Questions or comments for Pete? Or
One thing I did want to mention
Yes.
just too is Pete will also be with the league tie-in as well. He also will be serving on the league's legislative committee. I think is that the proper term of it? Legislative Affairs Committee.
Legislative Policy Committee, LPC.
So of course, the league always sends out letters for involvements in committees, and I've asked Pete to submit his name in there, and he will be serving on that group. So part of those kind of, I think it's weekly phone calls during the legislative session to kind of get updates on things that are going on. So kind of a tie-in with what you see here.
With the resolution approving the 2023 Clive State Legislative Priorities.
Second.
we have motion and a second to approve the resolution. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And the clerk, please post the vote. And that passes by a vote of 4-0.
Thank you, Your Honor. For the council's knowledge, we are busy scheduling with our state senators and state representatives. Also reaching out to other folks who have previously represented Clive to extend congratulations and let them know that we continue to look forward to a strong relationship with them as we head into the legislative session.
Thank you, Pete. Next, we just need a motion to approve a pay request.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion, would the council please vote? And the clerk posts that vote, and that passes by a vote of 3 approval with 1 abstention. All right, next up, Richard. Glen Park, RFPs.
All right, I don't think this is mine. Yep, plug this in real quick. I'm good. Tonight, we wanted to just take a few minutes to kind of update you on the progress that we're making towards the Linear Park improvements that we have discussed multiple times over the last 6, 12, 18, almost 24 months. One of the things we talked about at the last CIP process was getting that RFP moving forward so we can start to get those improvements planned and figuring out what the next steps are out there. So tonight, just want to give you a large overview of what we're at and what we're wanting to do from a consultant team that we'll have before you sometime in early 2023. The first main component here is Lanham Park and the improvements that we want to do out here. The image you see on the right is the one that was taken from the 86th Streets neighborhood plan work. So the intent of that was to get this high-level conceptual master plan. But what we want to do at this point is we want to take that conceptual master plan and we want to drill down and get a little bit more detailed master plan that then can be bid out for construction. We realize that this will likely take more than one phase. So what we'll do is build it out into a multi-phase project, but the phase 1 improvements, which have been budgeted and were approved in the CIP tonight, will likely include the playground replacement, a new shelter restroom building, and the spray ground. So essentially most of the elements that are there just to the north of the existing mini pitch. We will replace all those with new modern facilities that really meet the needs of the community out there. One of the biggest things related to that is knowing that Lanham Park will be a key component of how do we solve that stormwater solution for redevelopment of this neighborhood. We want to make sure whatever improvements we do out there will not have to be ripped up or redone because of whatever stormwater solution comes into the future. When we start to look at stormwater and how we're going to manage that. What do we want? Things we wanted to do is break that down into a sub-watershed master plan. What needs to be done within the area you see kind of outlined in this greenish bluish area to be prepared for future development, the park project, the road projects such as Alice's Avenue longer term, phase 2 of Harbach Boulevard. We really believe that Leland Park will be a huge, important part of how do we do that. We can use probably a lot of the space underneath the open lawn there for underground storage facility. There's a lot of ways we can do that, but we want to make sure that we're looking at that solution so we can be prepared for some of the redevelopment that we've talked about. The next one is Harbach Boulevard Phase 2. So that was talked a little bit here about pushing that back a year. That gives us the ability to, as part of this project, what does design of that set Phase 2 look like between 82nd Street and 86th Street? There's going to have to be parking solutions figured out there. There's going to have to be sidewalk solutions figured out there, stormwater solutions, and then how does that all interact with A, the glacier properties, B, the Harbach Center, as well as Leland Park, and all the way up to the intersection. So really what we'd like to do with part of this, design that conceptually so that then once a solution has been approved, then engineering can take it from there and finalize it for construction and the program date. The final big component of this RFP is looking at a trail connection between Harbach and the Greenbelt. That's one of the things that's been identified in the Greenbelt Master Plan in the past and was identified as part of this master planning project for the neighborhood. This is one of the few neighborhoods in the entire city, Clive, that does not have a safe connection to the Greenbelt. So what we want to do here is conceptualize what that connection looks like, basically between Harbach Boulevard and the Greenbelt. Ultimately, this trail corridor will go from Hickman all the way down to the Greenbelt to really tie this neighborhood into the Greenbelt itself. But we want to take a look at from that Harbach Boulevard all the way down to the Greenbelt. One of the things too we want to look at there is there a stormwater solution there as well? There is a stormwater pipe under that existing kind of greenish bluish line there. Is there something we can do to make it a better experience along with the trail, potentially daylighting it? Does it need to be resized as part of any construction that we do up in the Harbach area? So we just want to look at that and see, is there a way to do a really high quality facility there and attack some of our stormwater solutions? This is not entirely extensive, but really just wanted to start the discussion with the council, where we're going with this, what you'll see in early 2023 regarding a consultant team to tackle a lot of these projects out here as that next phase of work with the 86th Street neighborhood.
Picture that proposed connection right there.
Yeah.
Does the city have easements on that? Walk us through that a little bit.
Doug, I might ask you to come up. Doug has a better handle of what's existing out there today.
Multiple owners.
Yes, unfortunately, the city used to have ownership of that space. They used to be an old road street right of way. We did vacate that property and give it back to various adjacent property owners. What we do have today is an easement for the underground storm sewer that runs through that corridor. That would not give us the right to build a trail. So through this process, that idea of acquisition of the right to build the facility of the city's desire will have to be worked through with the various property owners. There are, in this particular case, Glacier Properties is one of the more dominant players, but there's, I think, 6 or 7 property owners that will have to be kind of along for the ride, if you will.
And would that, Doug, would that amount to easement, or would the city actually have to purchase that? How would that work?
I would hope that through the process, we're able to demonstrate that this facility itself is bringing value to the adjacent real estate and the opportunities to repurpose or reinvest into this asset would be enough motivation for voluntary grant of right to the city. If that doesn't work, then certainly evaluation to determine what would be an appropriate acquisition price. And ultimately, if the city does decide that it's a prudent public investment for the community, then condemnation would be the ultimate option if the city chose to move that path.
Anything else, Richard?
No, any other questions? I'd be happy to answer. One thing I would say before there's any other questions, this is a team of staff between Matt and Pete and engineering and stormwater and community development and leisure services that are really putting this together. We're going to have to find a really good team that comes with a lot of different disciplines to really do this in a way that we want to get this done with a lot of different pieces that need to be coordinated. But at the end of the day, the primary piece of this is moving forward on the redevelopment of Linan Park so we can continue to show improvements out there. It's been about 1.5 years now since we got the mini pitch in. So we're taking that next step to show continued improvement out there in that park.
Your Honor, this being such a significant RFP, typically we usually get the RFP out on the street, but we wanted to check in with the council, make sure there's any questions. We know that this will be a big, and it's one of your top priority policy items in the strategic plan. So we wanted to kind of do this little check mark here. And then hopefully in January, February, probably February timeframe, we'll have I think it's February, be coming back to you with the team and get this work underway and get some improvements for Linan Park designed and bid out, construction drawings, the whole thing. So excited about it.
Richard, the RFP was for 2.5 million for phase one. What do we anticipate for the other phases of the project?
Yeah, ultimately, I don't think we know at this point because we don't know what those other stormwater solutions will be, what the recommendation is to be able to handle the redevelopment out there. That really just covers that core of those first phase one improvements, which are the kind of core park elements.
Any other questions for Richard? Very good.
Thank you.
Pete, community engagement.
Thank you, Your Honor and Council. So this is one of my favorite parts of my job. Annually, we get to talk about what the plan's going to be for how we're going to engage businesses and residents in Clive in the coming year in our mutual work together to achieve the strategic priorities that the council has set. I wanted to start though, talking about sort of where my starting point every year that I make this presentation. It's that headline, the basis of successful community engagement is trust. It's the trust of the residents, trust of the businesses. Some updated data though. 22 resident survey. Clive continues to have a very strong mark when it comes to public information services. That 88% was the same mark that we achieved in 2020. We sustained it in 2022. Those are high water marks for the city. However, as I mentioned during the resident survey presentation earlier this year, we saw some macro trends that started to have some downward force on our previous high water marks when it comes to overall confidence in our government, overall sense of being open and transparent to the public, and the job that we're doing welcoming resident involvement. I do think these are macro forces, not something more closely tied to Clive because of the way that we rank compared to all of the other communities that have used these questions in the past 5 years when they've surveyed their residents. So you can see they're under overall confidence in Clive government, even though we had a statistically significant drop from 2020, we still rank #1 out of 276 communities. The rankings there on the right-hand side of the slide are all very, very high, clearly in the top 1%, if not #1, #2 out of all of those other participating communities. That said, these are still forces sort of working against our ability to maintain high levels of trust. We must continue to be very vigilant about earning that and keeping that trust, which means, in my opinion, doubling down on the way that we do our engagement and communications with residents and businesses in Clive. And much of what you'll see in the rest of this presentation is how I think we can further invest in that work that we do across all the departments, but also focusing some additional resources in the communication shop, working closely with me and with Matt to make sure that we're coordinating messages and getting more volume out the door, enhancing the way that we do communications in Clive. A few headlines from this past year. Goats are always on the list because they are, again, the most popular city employees and probably the most popular state government employees in general in Iowa. But they're not the only storytellers and really positive stories that we have to tell. Top left there, you see a group of our scouts who did a wonderful job painting water resources murals. There at the top in the middle, you see that group of kids. Those are students from Indian Hills Junior High. Earlier this spring with our friends at Metro Waste, they were out pulling bags and bags and bags of trash out of the Greenbelt, helping us tell the story about how we need to be good stewards of that space and keep pollution from ever making its way into the Greenbelt in the first place. We've had a number of capital projects through the course of the year. You see the bioretention cells on Clark Street that got finished up. You see our public works crews working diligently in Indian Hills Woods. Anytime we're doing those big capital improvements, that takes a lot of community engagement time as well. I was particularly happy to share a story about Indian Hills Woods. Before we got in there to start doing the dirt work again this fall, at the council's direction, I went door to door. I'll talk with all the neighbors about the start of construction, let them know that this is coming. Not everybody had been able to make it out to those community neighborhood meetings we'd had in the woods. And as I was knocking on the doors, I came across one household where they were very clearly getting ready for a big party. Turns out it was the rehearsal dinner that night before a big wedding that was happening, and they were concerned that there was going to be a bunch of dust and dirt. Well, I could take that. I went immediately to our public works and parks crew, said, hey, you're going to see this as we're getting ready to do that grubbing work back there. They said, no problem, Pete. We'll stay away from that property so that we don't get any dust on all their outdoor decorations and all the other stuff they were getting ready to do. So community engagement at its best yields those kinds of results, a real positive experience for everybody involved. We were very happy this year to have some wonderful partnerships come into place. You see there donation that was made by Polk County to the Greenbelt Landing Project. There's our supervisor, Robert Brownell, former supervisor. Always in our hearts, our supervisor. And then you also see Congresswoman Axney, who hosted a town hall at the Clive Public Safety Building about infrastructure needs. That event, sort of playing it forward through the course of the year and good relationship building, led to a wonderful opportunity to work with the Congresswoman to secure an appropriation request. And we hope that in the next few weeks in the slam dunk session, we see a budget approved that includes those dollars for Greenbelt Landing. Final one I'll mention there are some that are related to our public, our leisure services team. So you see a picture of a lot of volunteers from the Clive Festival there on the bottom row and the Aquatic Center, basketball over there on the far right. No department is touching and regularly communicating with Clive residents more frequently than leisure services. The volume of content they are creating, the one-on-one interactions they're having on a weekend to weekend basis, just with basketball, we're talking about 800 plus families that are going to be involved with that program. It's a wonderful way for us to continue to progress the values of the city, to make sure we share those accurately and in meaningful ways with folks who we are here to serve. Any questions about these headlines? Okay. This is also a familiar slide. This is that spectrum of ways that we can engage with, communicate with the community, moving from inform to empower. Inform being purely there to share critical information with residents. On the far other side, though, you have empower, which is residents directly participating in the decision-making that comes before this council. As you typically move from left to right, you end up having more lifting, more resources necessary as you get into empower as compared to inform. But even informing residents in a meaningful way on a big topic can be a big lift. Later on in the deck, I'm going to talk about what we've got ahead of us with the stormwater rates changes and the irrigation rate changes. In that situation, it's not going to be a story about what we might do. The council has already given very clear direction and is going to be setting that policy formally when we go through the budget process. Should everything work out as the council has directed thus far, we will be informing residents about what that new structure is going to be. But there will be complexities. It will involve change, and there will be some folks who are in some levels confused, and maybe even some people who are opposed. That's an example of informing that is going to require significant resources for the first 6 months, probably the full 12 months of 2023. This engagement work that we do annually, it takes a lot of different shapes. There'll be things that come up that we haven't anticipated, but we absolutely know that we are going to be putting resources against these top strategic goals that have been established by the council. There you see the list of the policy and management goals that were prioritized by all of you this past August. Some of those are more internal type projects. Others very obviously have a major public and engagement component to them. These are the priority campaigns that I have identified based on those strategic priorities the council has set. I'll quickly move through those. Employee recruiting and retention. We're right now working on getting our film for our evergreen employee recruiting video. We'll be pairing that up with some additional work that we'll do with our HR department on Clive 365, our new intranet, and some other tools to make sure that we are supporting employee success once they're on board, and also building the best applicant pools we possibly can. I did mention the irrigation and stormwater rate changes between now and June 15th. So I think June 15th is the due date for that first bill when the new rates will be in place. That's our 6-month window to get a number of sort of smaller policy decisions made, get everything finished up with the budgets, make sure that we've got everything ready with our information campaign, and then roll that campaign for a solid 2 to 3 months so folks have every opportunity to understand what's coming. This is a very, very significant lift that's ahead of us. Right alongside that, in significance of lift, will be all the work that we're doing with the Little Walnut Creek restoration, trail detours that we have to coordinate with Waukee and, with Urbandale and Waukee. And just generally letting people know, especially if they live right along that corridor, that trees are coming down. That sewer work necessitates that. But while we're doing that, we'll also be taking the opportunity to make stabilizations on Little Walnut Creek and long-term build a better habitat that they'll enjoy for decades to come. Difficult story to tell, very important one for us to get going on right away. I'm pleased to report that Public Works team, Jeff May and others have done excellent work getting the 2080 agreement really hammered out, so that we will be ready, I believe, here in the second half of January or mid-January to conduct that neighborhood meeting with all of the Northwest neighborhood community, let them know what's coming, and then start doing some of that more one-on-one communication with property owners that back right up to the Greenbelt where they're going to have the most immediate effects of the sewer project. Water resources related projects. If you thought we went big with water resources in 2022, I think you'll be very happy to see how big we're going in 2023. The Harbach Neighborhood Stormwater Partnership, that's a $150,000 investment just that we're making in those private properties and other types of property that are in that neighborhood to meet our compliance needs from the first phase of Harbach reconstruction. But if we can go bigger and start building up a bank, we're absolutely going to do that. Citywide 2023 SQR program. And when we make the budget presentation, you'll see that we have a proposal for some of the new revenues coming from the way that we'll do our irrigation rates, some of that revenue going into a city SQR 2023 program, not as big as we went in 22, but still very large. Right now, we're talking about on the magnitude of $50,000 in city money, which would be paired with about $50,000 in private money as well. If the numbers work out as they did in 2022, that would be about 500,000 square feet of SQR that we would be able to do. That would probably, if timelines work out the way we see them working out now, would be in the fall, September timeframe when we'd like to do that work. The Harbach project also has a lot of SQR. If we are able to pull it together and get our pool of participants together, we'll get that work going in the spring of 2023. Clive tree sale, we heard from the council that you wanted to go ahead and move forward with that. Right now, we're planning on that in the fall, but I'm going to continue to work closely with our Parks Department to make sure that that's feasible, a good time to plant. If we need to try and do something different in the spring, we'll work quickly to see if we can get that done. The Harbach project, though, also includes quite a few tree plantings as well, and some other types of water resources best practices. Finally, the Clive Water Resources Grant Program. We would be creating policy with that final program parameter to the council here in the spring for fielding grant proposals from residents and businesses in the spring and summer for projects to be completed in the summer and fall and reimbursements made in the fall and the winter. That is a lot of work, all related around telling the story of great water stewardship, natural resources stewardship in Clive. It's absolutely on brand with what we've done over the past years. So. Next, their Greenbelt Landing fundraising. All of you are very familiar with where we're at. We've had some good results here in the past few weeks. Momentum seems to be building here through the end of the year. And we'll need to keep that momentum going so that we're at a place where the council feels comfortable bringing that project forward for consideration and sort of green lighting it, even if we have some additional fundraising to do. The Greenbelt Gala, that could potentially be an annual fundraising event, since we'll be doing this type of work around Greenbelt projects for years to come. That first one would be here in the fall, probably October. It would be everything comes together, a great time to celebrate meeting our fundraising goal for Greenbelt Landing and showing everybody some of the early concepts for how that work's going to come together when we start construction, hopefully here in 2023. 86th Street neighborhoods, you've all heard just from Richard a lot of the work that needs to be done around Lenan Park. I think that's probably the anchor for the 86th Street neighborhoods planning, a plan this year for we're going to keep people feeling some sense of momentum, but it's not the only thing we'll be able to do. There'll be ongoing work around the Harbox Center and ongoing storytelling that we can do, hopefully, with our friends, the students over at Crestview Elementary. Every year I try and find one fun project that we can do with them. And I'm working with the staff now to find out how we might be able to plug this current generation of students into the 86th Street neighborhoods plan. The last one I'm going to mention, I'm not going to go through the rest, but the last one I want to mention is Greenbelt Trail improvements. So yes, we've got the detours and the trail closures that'll be out in the Northwest neighborhoods. This is just the first, though, of many, many years where there's a lot of changes going on with the Greenbelt Trail. We know that not too far into the future, we've got the sewer project that the Water Reclamation is going to be doing through the Greenbelt, roughly from about the sort of the midpoint, the interstate further east in Clive. That's not immediately upon us. What is immediately on us, though, is trail etiquette. Too often I'm hearing stories now, seeing posts on Facebook, hearing even from all of you about moments when you have a bad 3 seconds on the Greenbelt when some kid riding a bike or some adult riding a bike came up on you too fast, didn't announce that they were passing. And suddenly what took 3 seconds ends up kind of coloring your entire experience for the next 30 minutes or 3 hours, however long you might be out there in the park. If we bring good common sense and some good sense of respect for each other down into the Greenbelt, we can make sure that we don't unintentionally sort of create this sense that it's a place that's only for fast bike riders and not for people who want to go and use the trail in other responsible ways. So this year we want to make a good push on that. And I'm looking for right now, if you know one, a group of volunteers or an Eagle Scout that wants to do a fun painting project in the Greenbelt this spring and summer, I've got a great one for them that'll pay big dividends when it comes to trail etiquette. Any questions about some of our primary engagement campaigns for 2023?
Questions for Pete?
It's a big lift. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on there, Pete. Obviously, we've been discussing this stuff for quite some time. You know, a lot of continuity with what we've been doing. It's fun to see the fruition of these conversations, discussions, and continuance of solid policies. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. You've seen this slide. I'm putting it up, though, again, because the one that we need to roll on right away is Northwest neighborhoods. Once this work gets sort of all blessed with the 2080s and we're ready to roll with the sewer, have some of our early concepts around where the stabilizations on Little Walnut Creek are going to be, the timelines for when the work east of the road is going to happen and west of the road, we need to be ready to get that out there to the community. So same information that I shared when we did the State of Clive water presentation. I only put it back here again to say that in January, we'll be hot and heavy with this campaign. Some of the tactics and tools that we'll use to execute our engagement plan. This is a similar list to what you've seen in the past. The big, the one that I think is probably taking a newer shape than when the last time we discussed this is the non-emergency texting opportunities. So the Alert Iowa platform that we are already pushing people toward, the replacement for Code Red. I've been engaging with that company about a Clive specific instance of the platform that we would be able to use for water main breaks, street closures that aren't emergency street closures, snow ordinance in effect. Waiting on pricing from them to see what that would look like. But my instinct right now tells, sort of leads me in the direction of saying Clive needs something that is text focused, not something that's a big, heavy app type focus. And if we're going to do text, yes, nice to be able to do two-way type texting. Although I'm less enamored now with some of the automated back and forth. It's one thing if we can just have a couple rounds of back and forth and then it generates some other communication to like an email that then triggers the actual casework that we get into. What's more important to me is to be able to sort of geographically gather up all the people that I want to talk to in one big text. So if we do have a water main break, I can go to a map, get all of the numbers that are associated with addresses in that area and text those people directly. We've had other situations in the city where we're trying to get new services deployed, like when we did the carts that went out, where that type of tool was really, really valuable. I'd like to be able to do the same type of thing for other types of services that Clive delivers in the future.
City of Des Moines does something, and I hear they do this one well. But it's a text where for public works or whatever, you can send a picture or a message to them saying, you know, tree got destroyed or the fence is destroyed or sidewalks, potholes.
Yep.
Have we looked at that? It might be too robust for us.
The one I've looked at that's like that is a product called Text by Gov. Fort Dodge uses that right now. The price for these types of platforms isn't astronomical. The question then is, though, are you prepared to do that level of intake, do that level of casework if you're going to start accepting those types of pictures? And because it takes somebody to manage the platform who can then, even if they're not in that situation sitting in public works, somebody in potentially my shop has got to be ready to send there to then receive and distribute out to the right spots so that people don't get left hanging.
I'd be happy at the beginning just to have a one-way text that, you know, just to start with, of pushing a message out. Not so much worrying about the volley back at us, because I think that you're right, that could be overwhelming, but just to at least tell them about something.
Yeah.
And then they can go to the website, see further information.
Yeah.
The one way would be nice to start.
Yeah. The rule that I try to apply with this is we're not looking for one be all end all. It's the layers. It's the combination of touches. And it's the combination of quality touches too. So something that you get with a text for me is forgettable, right? I'm happy to get it at the right time or at the right moment if I'm in a space and I get the appropriate text. Yeah, it can be very valuable to me, but it's not nearly as valuable as the good phone conversation I have with the utility clerk explaining to me what's going on with my bill. We have to bring all of those things together to achieve the engagement quality that we want to have. One last one I'll mention is that final bullet, multi-language communications. I do think that we've got, especially when it comes to Spanish, a number of native Spanish speakers who live in our community who we are not necessarily giving the best engagement experience to. We've made improvements. Technology allows us to do that, but having more Spanish language speaking staff would be nice to have. I know that the chief has talked about wanting to have that in the police department or having those type of resources in the city. It could be a huge service to us. It's benefited us to build relationships with native Chin and Hakka Chin speakers on a number of cases in the past too. That's an area where I think we've got some growing that we continue to do.
You know, Pete, along those lines, I think some of the events we did at Linand Park this year, the Cinco de Mayo, Richard, with some of those events are great ways to reach out to those folks and population. Really a great way to, to extend our messages right there. They show up. There's really nice crowds that were there. We can continue utilizing that platform to get information out, but I agree 100% when we've always talked about having more multilingual members of the Clive workforce right there to be able to address some of those needs.
That's an intentional hiring, right? But it's easier said than done.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. The other tactics there are similar to what we've talked about doing in the past. It's continuous improvement across these proven platforms that have worked well for the city of Clive. Here's where I'd like to spend the bulk of our discussion time tonight, if the council is. I tried to keep it to 9 slides for you, Councilman.
We're an hour into this and you just said bulk.
I did. I misspoke. I misspoke. I am looking forward to concise discussion of this final slide, Councilman.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay. Communications enhancements was a strategic priority as set by the council. Matt and I have discussed this at length. We brought it up. We brought it up in previous years as well. We think that one way that we could do this quickly, efficiently, and to great effect is by adding a communication specialist position here in Clive. Top bullet is the areas of sort of day-to-day responsibility that we anticipate this person could have. Second bullet is the places where they would be able to plug in and add additional capacity around some very important strategic priorities in other departments.
One thing I wanted to add on to this one too is, so in the packet, put together a memo really outlining my vision of what I see for this new position, and then some transition kind of evolution of Pete's role as assistant city manager. I know the council discussed this a little bit. We were in the CIP work session. So really wanted to lay that out. We've had some conversations, personnel committee about it. So really wanted to lay that out. Of course, you know, this will come up again in the budget process. I don't have those numbers for you today in terms of showing you the whole general fund budget picture. But what I'm hoping to do is at least put on your radar, here's where we see, you know, the role going forward, where I see the role going forward and Pete's role going forward, and getting some feedback, dialogue with the council. Are you in agreement with that vision, or is there tweaks that need to be considered? Kind of starting that engagement now, and then back when we get to that first meeting in February, we present the general fund budget. That's when you'll see, okay, here's what it looks like in the budget in terms of the resources to fund the position starting July 1 of next year. So we wanted to kind of get you some of this information early, basically, to chew on, you know, feedback tonight or feedback over the next month, whatever that may be, and then coming back with that decision point through your budget process.
I think you're right on here, and I support especially this first bullet piece, the frontline piece, and all those duties. I think it pays heavy dividends for you in the entire city to have a person like this in place. My day job, we're fortunate to have a couple folks like this, and it takes a load off of every department. Not just off Pete's plate, but it will take a load off everybody's department if it's done properly. And I have no doubt it will be, but I'm fully in support of this communication specialist.
You know, I was a little skeptical when we first talked about that. I always am. We look at adding more FTEs to the payroll right there. It really is, as you know, taking a step back and look at this, especially other cities of our size that are doing the same thing, and ones that, you know, might not be as good at what Clive does. You know, that's just the trend right out there, especially with social media and communication right there. It's a lot more than just cranking out a newsletter every month. Just the platforms available to the city. It's really become, you know, sole focus is what it is. It's a heavy lift, that thing. One thing I would add, Matt, and it was a very comprehensive memo that you wrote. As you know, we look at what would Pete be doing. One of the things that we've talked about in the past was a lobbyist that we used to have for the city of Clive. We no longer have, and I could see a natural extension. Pete, you're already doing that to some capacity right now, but certainly increased capacity of Pete's ability to work with our legislature. You know, I'll talk a little bit more, but especially as we look at the degradation of home rule and some other things that clearly affect Clive, having a lobbyist for Clive on the Hill, you know, pressing our agenda only benefits our citizens.
I just wanted to make a quick comment to add to what Councilmember McCoy was saying. You know, I do think it's going to be fantastic for, you know, helping all of the functions across the you know, city departments, but I think it's also going to help drive further engagement with the community, right? And that's something we want to point out. And I know, Pete, you already mentioned that, but just want to really focus in on that and make sure that we're really seeing, or you know, we're going to find a way to track those improvements and the additional engagement that I'm sure that this position will allow us to do with citizens.
Mm-hmm. My bellwether on how we're doing historically has been the resident survey. I think that that's an important data point that we'll want to continue to reference back to since we can see trend lines over time. But one of the points there on performance tracking, it's a chore if you've got a lot of other things on your plate to sort of do that regular tracking of how we're doing with audience growth and engagement across digital platforms. Oftentimes when I've done it in the past, I'll get to a point where I wonder whether gathering all that data and analyzing it is really giving me any sort of useful, actionable information, or is it just a bunch of noise when I'm missing the signal? You can build these performance tracking platforms, though, so that they are set up to get signal and weed out the noise. But it takes lifting and it takes some strategic thinking. And then it takes regularly making sure you're populating it with good data. I envision the specialist being able to work closely with me to build that type of performance tracking platform or dashboard for the community, which will only help us make more informed decisions about where we want to invest moving forward, maybe where we want to reallocate resources as well.
And Shrikant, to your point, though, it's up to each one of us as well to bring that message back, right? You talked about that message in your campaign, and as you know, others campaign and talk, you'll get great information from the public door to door to bring that data back on how our communications is doing, and you'll get the real data there. So
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think this is I'm not seeing this as, hey, we're hiring a communication specialist, so none of us have to do anything anymore, right? This is just it's a way to help us be strategic and even more efficient in where we're prioritizing and how we're engaging to make that engagement that we do all the more beneficial to everyone.
What I would add too is I think, and the council's shared this with staff, and we're seeing it as the expectation. I think Councilmember Klein, you referred to this, the expectations of the public in these spaces has increased drastically in the last 3 to 4 to 5 years, that there's an expectation that we have to be in all these spaces and we have to be consistent in these spaces. And to Pete's credit, he's tried to keep us there, and departments as well, doing the best that they can, but having a little more boots on the ground. And then Pete's still very much immersed in overseeing this position, and then the strategy involved with the bigger picture aspects of this, but then having that doer to then go out and take some of that so we can do more of it, as I know that's what the council is wanting to see, and I think our community is expecting. Excited about this opportunity. Of course, want to show you how it all plays out with the finances, but I think this has really come together, and we've gotten some good detail now to show you all.
Any other questions?
Not hearing any. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And as you race back to your seat, maybe we'll start with Shrikant on his report.
No report, Your Honor, tonight.
Ted, Eric.
Yes, Mayor. A couple of things. One, attended the Cooper's Hawk grand opening with Councilmember McLaney and Mayor Edwards right there. Really a great addition to Clive, a $5.5 million investment in a beautiful facility. I look forward to continued success for those folks. Also attended the MAC with Mayor Edwards. Appreciate you sending those points out. Again, the key takeaways from that are, again, property taxes, home rule, the restrictions on that, local building codes. Tomorrow I'll be attending the West Side Legislative Breakfast, and again, reinforcing those some of the points we made here on our legislative priorities, but also those MAC points as well.
Very good. I'd sent a note. We're looking for a council member to serve on the Art in the Trail Committee that, Richard, I don't know if you want to comment briefly on that. You have the applications in right now, is that correct?
Yeah, we're working to select the pieces for the annual Art Along the Trail exhibition. One of the things that we do every year, in addition to members from the public art, the business community, and artists, the park board, we have the council has the opportunity to designate a member to be part of that selection process. So we're looking for a member that may be interested in doing that. And then we believe we got about 35 submissions this year. So we got some good pieces of art to look through and select for the annual exhibit.
How are you handling that without the merged board? Are you just doing?
So what we did, since they weren't technically merged till tonight, We got both members from Public Art as well as the Parks and Recreation Board.
That are going to be
Yeah.
still on the board.
Yes, correct.
Thank you, Richard. So if someone is interested in filling that role, please let me know. Michael?
I would be, but I will let others have a opportunity here to trump me. Hearing none.
I think you have your volunteer.
I will let Weaver know the opportunity was here, and if he needs,
He blew it.
if he needs to
blew it.
step in front of me, I will step down, but
Had a chance to do it to the absent person.
oh, that's good. Didn't think of that one.
It's, I don't know if you've done this before.
I have, and it was enjoyable.
It's a great
It is
committee to
fun.
be on.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah. It's fun.
The National Civility Summit, was this, I don't know how many of you might have had the opportunity to listen in, but there were a lot of good points. One of the things that was stressed is preparation. And one of the things I hope to bring forward here in the next month is a plan should we have a disruptor attend the meeting. The idea is you plan ahead, you have the plan in place, and hopefully you never use it. But we've seen what happens elsewhere, so we want to plan accordingly. So I'll look for something on that probably in the next month or so. So we'll have a plan in place to review. But Pete, I don't know if you want to comment on what you heard.
Similar points about being prepared, planning ahead, and our presenters and during the summit emphasized how important sticking to a script is in those moments, having a good plan in place to protect you from that future litigious situation should it go down that path. So
Yes, it was starkly pointed out what happens if you wrongly throw someone out. So
Mhm.
you have to stick to the plan.
have a good script. Yep.
Have a good. All right, Susan.
Since I don't have much voice, I'll just briefly say we had another excellent meeting with the Clive Economic Vitality Committee, in great part due to the presentation by Amanda on the 86th Street neighborhoods. Some great comments and a real feeling of momentum going forward. So glad to report that.
Thank you. Hope you get feeling better. Michael.
I will report on DART. DART, Elizabeth was recognized on Tuesday's meeting for her last official kind of role, a meeting as the executive or CEO in that case. A plan has been put in place. A selection committee has been made for to do the interviews. A company will come in front of us on what recruiting company will be there. In January, Elizabeth will stay on in some role until the end of January. Interim will come into place in the next couple weeks as needed. She is out of, I think John remembers her name, out of Ames. Sharon. She's Cyride, used to run Cyride in Ames. She'll step in. She also worked for DART for a number of years, over a decade, I believe it was. So it'll be a good fit for a temporary situation. And then she will be on till minimum of July, but the contract will take her through September if needed. And then Elizabeth coming back and forth until the end of January. So lots of things moving forward with DART. You'll hear a lot more in the future on the fee structure, the governance, and the fees coming along with that. So that's going to be a giant lift in the next 3 to 4 years on how to structure that. Des Moines wants out of their extra payments that they've been making. So more to come from Shirkant next month.
Very good. Very good. We look forward to that. Council.
I will have an update tonight. I'd like to introduce my law partner, Neil Weston, who is in the audience today as the new Assistant City Attorney. As the firm has been the city attorney representatives for the city for 6 decades now, we're honored to continue that tradition and have affirmatively worked through some succession planning. And so I wanted to affirmatively thank Neil for stepping forward to be a more consistent voice and representative on behalf of the city for the future. Neil is a corporate attorney, non-litigator, so not, the silver hammer, maybe not the golden hammer, but Neil has a thriving corporate practice. He represents nonprofits, multinational corporations, and does a lot of the transactional contractual reviews, licensing, intellectual property, trade secrets, privacy, and information security. This is a great fit for the next kind of 5 years, especially of the legal needs for the city, as we've seen more and more of these agreements and collaboration. Neil is in United Way. He's got experience in the community with United Way, Make-A-Wish, and consistent with Clive's Greenbelt, the Neil Smith Wildlife Refuge. He's been in prairie restoration work. So Neil brings a lot of heart and soul and brains to the table here. So he is a University of Iowa graduate. I don't know how that plays out with the council.
Very well, very well.
And then a Texas School of Law
The mayor
graduate.
appreciates that.
So on that, thank you again for renewing your relationship with the firm. We look forward to continued service at the will of the council.
Did he know your nickname before tonight?
I don't know if he did know my nickname, the Golden Hammer. The firm calls me a lot of other things.
So do I.
Neil, when did you graduate from UT?
99.
Okay.
And I apologize for Iowa.
Do you consider yourself a Longhorn?
Oh.
I consider myself more of a Hawkeye than a Longhorn.
That's the right answer.
But I do now have a child at Iowa State, so I'm.
Oh, okay.
Motion to reconsider the contract with NYMEX.
The real question, do you have any military background?
I do not.
We'll work on that.
Thank you, Your Honor. That is all I have.
Very good. Pete, we'll jump back to you.
This Saturday, the annual Clive Lions holiday basket delivery will happen. Starting, we're saying 9 o'clock, but I'd say get there at 8:30 because there's always a flurry of activity. 9 o'clock is when we have the comments from folks, and then you'll have a row of folks getting out to vehicles. We hope to get to over 80 households on Saturday. My boys and my wife will be delivering to a couple of families, and I hope that many of you will be able to join us that morning as well. I was already out with the Lions doing a little bit of collecting of things that showed up at the different trees around Clive. And just generally taking pictures, and I'll be working with them to do a little thank you video with all that content once we get done with the deliveries. We'll also be working tomorrow on a couple of different videos. We have some additional testimonials for our Greenbelt Landing video that we'll be recording and getting some additional film for our employee retention recruiting evergreen video that we hope to deploy in spring, maybe even earlier in that 2023.
Very good. Thank you, Pete. Matt.
Few items for you tonight, Your Honor. We are going through a process of recruiting for a new Westcom chief. Our current chief, Darren Riney, will be leaving at the end of this month. We anticipated that happening, and so we've already been active in the recruitment efforts. We'll be interviewing finalists in January for his replacement. Member communities all involved, and of course, West Des Moines is the operating contractor for Westcom. So that is coming forward. Still working with the 911 Service Board on just some questions of resources. I know I've shared some of that background with the council. So there's a lot of things that are going on with Westcom right now. We'll have some budget impacts on us in the short term, but we'll be talking about that through the budget process this year. Also, speaking of the budget, their next meeting in January will be again, your first budget workshop related to the road use and utilities, and we'll be talking a lot about the tiered irrigation rates for water and stormwater irrigation, or tiered rates, excuse me. So a lot of moving pieces there. We've got some policy statements we'll be presenting to you for consideration as we kind of go through that 6-month process that Pete talked about in his presentation just a little bit ago. And then following up with the general fund budget of the first Thursday in February, now with us moving that meeting back a week to allow for attendance at the Greater Des Moines Partnership Dinner at the end of January. So lots to come at the next 2 council meetings related to budget. Also wanted to mention just kind of on the recruitment side, as Pete was talking about that, one thing that we recently did with the fire union as a memorandum of understanding, we're finding a need in terms of recruitment. Of course, fire paramedics has been a tough space to recruit in over the last couple of years. And I think the chief came up with a great idea and talked with the union about it in terms of in our current contract, we don't necessarily have a full pay scale for paramedic only or firefighter EMT positions. The chief wanted to see us look at paramedic only potentially as having some of those positions as being one of the most critical positions in our crews on full time. We typically want them to get to firefighter paramedic, but I think he's seen some need just in the workforce environment to have that flexibility in our union contract. We didn't have a full 9-step scale for those positions when we renegotiated the contract in the spring. Made good sense to the union. They were okay with it. And so we had three initial steps for those positions. So they've agreed to keep the same percentages in terms of paramedic only is about 90% of the firefighter paramedic pay scale. Firefighter EMT is 85%. So they were willing to allow us to have that option of a full 9-step scale for those positions. Gives us some flexibility just going forward from a recruitment perspective. You know, if we've got a really good paramedic only person who just isn't quite there yet on the firefighter side, gives us that flexibility. So something new there. Just to add a little bit on to Susan's comments too, we are anticipating having the Economic Vitality Committee to actually do a co-meeting or a shared meeting with our Plan and Zoning Commission next month. So they're that first Thursday in January for presentation of the University Corridor plan. You've been seeing a lot of news on that with going through West Des Moines process. Again, the plan is predominantly exactly the same as what you saw last time. There's just been a kind of a big pause in the process with things that are going on with Valley West Mall. And so we wanted to present that to the Economic Vitality Committee, Plan and Zoning, before it comes to you at your next council meeting in January. So we're able to pair those together, which is a nice win there, and kind of laid out the schedule for economic vitality over the next couple of months. Lastly, for tonight, so you remember about a month ago, I made the council aware that Moody's has updated or changed their scorecard in terms of how they do ratings for local governments, state and local governments. And because of that adjustment in their scorecard, they're doing reviews of ratings for cities or state governments and counties across the country. We were one of the ones of approximately 20-ish cities in Iowa that were getting that, what they call a surveillance review because of the change in the scorecard. There's a lot of things that go into these scorecard changes in terms of how they determine ratings. Some of them were to our advantage in terms of where we're at, of our size of our tax base per capita, and some other financial and economic factors. There were some that were more negative towards us in terms of could affect our rating in terms of a downgrade scenario. And so we, PFM and Elizabeth and I had a kind of a normal rating call, if you will. We treated it like a normal rating call. Presentation to their reviewer this morning, went through all of that. She did a good job of outlining to us kind of the changes, but it was really kind of moving the marks up, for lack of a better term. So we'll see what happens. They will do a review of our information, and next month they'll have a rating committee review it, and we'll see what happens to our rating as a result of this scorecard change. It's really things that are outside of the city's control that they're changing. Some of it is based on financial disclosures. You know, we do a cash-based audit that you just adopted at the last council meeting. We don't do an accrual-based audit. We actually get a negative mark because of that. Again, it's not something that you can easily change, but it's how they now put in these notching factors and that could affect your rating. So just anticipating kind of sharing that with the council. We'll see what information is provided next month, and then we'll have a follow-up with you all of whether that would impact our rating. Again, it wouldn't be a significant change to our rating if it did go down, but it could kind of outside of our control affect our rating for future bond issues.
Good.
So that's all I have, Your Honor.
For Matt. Anything else for the good of the order this evening?
Happy holidays to you, excellent people.
We'll see you all back here in January. Oh, there isn't any. No correspondence? Very good. We'll adjourn at 7:44.